Hello there, and welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis that will help you discover, clarify, and live your purpose.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to What's the Point? I'm your host, Bill Ellis, with another terrific guest and one that is absolutely ideal for a podcast focused on clarifying and living your purpose. My guest today is Akhtar Badshah, Dr. Badshah, to be precise. How are you, sir? Welcome.
Thank you very much, Bill, for inviting me to What's the Point. I'm really delighted to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
As am I. Thank you. And I always appreciate my guests when and the gift of their time, which is something that you can't replicate. So thank you for that. Akhtar is the chief catalyst at Catalytic Innovators Group, and he's the co-founder of the Center for Purpose Mindset. So now you'll start to get listeners the connection of why I'm so excited to have him on the show. He is also the author of the book, Purpose Mindset, which we'll talk about a good bit here. But as much as I want to talk to and have you share your insights and experience and knowledge on purpose, I always find it fascinating, Akhtar, to get a sense of how people ended up where they are today. So, born in India, tell us a little bit about your upbringing and your education there and kind of your journey here to the U.S.
Yeah, so, born in India, grew up in India, middle class family. My father, the shopkeeper, got myself an education, went to architecture school, was lucky to get admission in one of the top architecture schools in India, completed my graduation, and on a whim applied to MIT to do graduate studies, right? It's 1980. It's not that easy to come to the US to get admission, to get a scholarship, to get a visa, to be able to do all of that. And I was just fortunate enough to have hit 4 lotteries. Right? I applied only to MIT and I got admission at MIT. I got a partial scholarship and then ran around and get some more money to be able to afford to pay the fees. Got a visa. 1 in 10 applications 9 out of 10 get turned down. And then, I was fortunate enough to marry my wonderful wife, who I've been with for 41 years. So it all happened during that time. And that changed the trajectory of my life in some ways, right? So you got all of this enormous gifts. And then to come to MIT and to study architecture, and then being invited by the dean to help him craft a new program, teaching there, and then eventually moving on after 10 years at MIT to the nonprofit sector. And then from there into the philanthropy world with Microsoft running their corporate philanthropy, and now back at the university teaching and consulting and writing. So it's just a journey where opportunities were given to me that I was either stupid enough or smart enough to take. Because, at that point in time, it just, you're just taking a chance and either it may work out or not. And that, for me, some of it just worked out.
Well, yeah, and it's a fascinating story and many years cut down to a very quick scenario. And thank you for that very rapid journey. But when you say that the opportunities and you took a chance and it just worked out, that right there, I think, might be the lesson or a lesson that myself and listeners take, which is if we don't take a chance, it's not going to work out. So taking a chance, we at least have the chance for it to work out. And I laughed a little bit when you said you went to architecture school in India and then applied to MIT. It's not like everyone every day applies to MIT. That's quite an ambitious undertaking, and everything from there certainly showed that it paid off. Now, correct me, you are at the University of Washington?
Correct. I'm at the University of Washington. And again, I mean, part of the reason I applied to MIT is that one of our ex-students from India had graduated from MIT, had come back and set up an architectural practice in the city that I was studying, and I was working with them as an intern. And they basically said, why didn't you apply? And the only reason I applied to one university is that that's all the money I had for an application fee.
Ah,
Right,
okay.
that you could get in dollars to apply. So you had to pick. And I couldn't apply to 10 universities or what kids do now.
Mm.
And my kids applied to multiple universities before they decided which one they wanted to go to. So when you're coming from abroad, and especially from resource challenged environments, you've got to take a chance. And, I would have got it, I might not have got it. And if I'd not come to MIT, I might have gone and done typical architecture work in India, graduated, and been a successful architect.
Yeah. So it's always a powerful story, in my opinion, of how people get to where they started from very humble beginnings to where they are now, where you have a global presence with your work. And a lot of that work has become perhaps most well-known associated with Microsoft. And we'll touch on that in just a moment, the subject of your book. But share with us how, Akhtar, you segued from what I'll call traditional classic architecture into the field that you're in now.
So I was a student at MIT doing my master's, and to earn a living, I was interning, or I had a job at the Aga Khan Program for Islamic Architecture, which was an endowed position at MIT to teach Islamic architecture. I was just there to help with the copying and fixing just running around doing whatever people wanted me to do. The dean at the the Department of Architecture and Planning had an office there, and he would show up, and I would get a chance to interact with him once in a while. And one day he asked me to help him out with a new program that he wanted to launch, which was designing for Islamic societies, a master's level program, which I did. And he asked me to continue after I graduated to help launch the program. The person that came on as the Aga Khan professor to run the program was somebody that I had met and I was really admiring, a Australian British architectural historian and architect who was world famous in Islamic architecture in Sri Lanka. And I got to know him, and he asked me to stay on and work with him. And that kind of brought me into a space that I had no real intention of going into, which was education. And I learned with them, and I taught. And then a new opportunity came 10 years later to work with a group of people that were launching a new nonprofit focused on cities. And the trajectory changed for me during those 10 years, where the focus went away from a built form, which is architecture, to really understanding human environments and how humans live in communities, while I was teaching at the Designing for Islamic Societies program. So that shift moved me from just a focus on physical form to actually getting a deeper understanding of how people live in resource constrained or resource enriched environments. So that's really kind of brought me then into the nonprofit sector, and from there into Microsoft because of other events that happened where my wife was working for Microsoft on the East Coast and she moved here to Seattle. So I had to leave my nonprofit and come here and start something on my own. And that kind of brought me into the Microsoft orbit, where I then became the head of Microsoft's philanthropy. Now, it kind of all looks simple, right? I mean, when you kind of reflect back on it, oh, okay, that makes sense. But to me, it was a lot of hard work, right? I mean, a lot of hard knocks, a lot of things that we did not know, a lot of things that you had to do. And it's just, for listeners, nothing comes easy. You have to work for it. And if you have that mindset that you can apply, then you're able to take the chance, and then you're able to build on the chance that is given to you. When I was teaching Islamic architecture, I mean, I wasn't from that region. I wasn't an expert in that field. And a lot of people questioned my capabilities and my ability to teach. So I had to overcome that by being far more resourceful, working much harder than everybody else, and building my credibility.
And that seems to me, Akhtar, to be something that, again, is applicable to all of us. When we pursue something that may not be our strong suit at the time, but something that moved you along, and this will segue us specifically into your book and your general teaching at the Catalytic Innovators Group, and certainly at the Center for Purpose Mindset. As you moved along that journey, and again, it's been a 40, 50-year journey that you've covered for us in just a few moments. At the root of what you were doing, you had a purpose. And we've talked a bit, and just to get back on record with my listeners and myself, is I believe very strongly in what I call the purpose principle, which is we need to have a purpose to move us along. We need to have a reason. We need, a lot of people call it our why. And for me, that then ignites our passion and gets us excited to do what we're doing. But then the third element, in my view, is persistence, which allows us to stick with it when the passion fades. It allows us to grow and evolve our purpose as we go. So with that as kind of a setup, let me yield the floor back to you and ask you, as you reflect back, talk to us about your purpose and how and what that purpose was and how it grew and evolved through the years.
So to be honest, I frankly really didn't know my purpose at all. Like, part of the reason,
and that's a good point. Excuse me just for a really quick minute. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's an excellent point that I want everyone listening to understand, because I was in that same boat too. Not knowing our purpose is fine. Seeking our purpose is essential. Now, again, my apologies for the interruption.
And
Please go on.
That's a great way to frame it, right? So, I mean, I wish I had existed when I was younger, where somebody could have actually taken me on this journey and got me to craft a purpose statement, an individual purpose statement, which would allow me to discover and see it in front of me, my purpose, my strengths, and my values. For me, it was just innate. Now, Aaron Hurst, who's written a book called The Purpose Economy, did some research, and he kind of found that 30% of individuals have a purpose and find purpose in their work. 30% are driven by money. And another 30%, or 33% to be accurate, are driven by status. And in some ways, neither of them is a value judgment. Because, you're at different phases of life. When I came into this country, after my first job was to get a job because I had to pay off loans. And I had to get a visa. Right? But if we could all articulate our purpose and bring that into everything that we do, then our impact becomes much more than just self, but puts the community and society at the center of what we're doing. And that's the journey that we are on. So I wish I had kind of sat down and crafted this, but I just had the ability to stumble through it, which now looks that everything that I did was purposeful. But that's not
Mm-hmm.
true. Right? I mean, people go and do things that are interesting, something that is going to satisfy them. It just so happened that the space that I entered was always outside of just me. Right? Whether it was in the nonprofit sector or philanthropy or even my teaching, there was always something external that I had to connect to. And that was just, chance, luck. But I think important thing for our listeners, your listeners, is we don't need to have crafted it, but we should actually live it.
Yeah, and I think that sums up, Akhtar, why I do this podcast. That's exactly my purpose for What's the Point podcast, is to help people to understand exactly that. So you talked about the third approach to people with a purpose, people pursuing money, people pursuing status. I would submit that all of those are people with a purpose, just perhaps a different understanding of what purpose means. So if their purpose is to get money, they want money for a reason, and that might be status. That might be just to get material things. In your case, it was to help fund the path you were on, wherever that path was going to take you. So again, I think at the end of the day, we all have purpose of some degree, but like you said, it's clarifying what our purpose is so that we can then live it. And you talk about, let me move on, you talk about a purpose trinity, right? Where you talk about the when purpose is between yourself and your work and your community. Do I have that right? And can
Correct.
you expand on that?
Yeah, so part of what I was trying to do was to distinguish between a growth mindset, which is really what all of us have become extremely familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Growth mindset. Growth is important. Of course, having a growth mindset and a seminal work done by Carol Dweck at Stanford University is actually very important. But to me, it is still a duality between you and your work. And you improve, your work improves, you get benefits. And it's that virtuous cycle between you and yourself. And clearly, we can't have a fixed mindset. We need to have a growth mindset. Now, there are some that will argue that you need both a fixed and a growth mindset. But I am suggesting is we should actually also have a purpose mindset. And purpose introduces the trinity of the community. You benefit, your work benefits, your community benefits. And that then allows all of us to be on that ascending virtuous spiral of benefits. So that we are not just self-growth is important, but why? You started off by saying purpose is the why. And, even when my students come to me and they ask, I want to be a CEO. And I said, why? Have you figured out your why? If you figure out your why, then you might decide that the CEO title is really not your why. For some, it may be the why. So it's this notion of trying to kind of get people to stop thinking about, oh, I need to have that title or I need to earn, so that kind of money. It can happen if one actually sits down and figures out their why.
Yeah, and I will give you full sanction when those students come to you to use the question, "What's the point?" Because that's where the title of this podcast came from. I want to be this. I want to get that. I want to do that. What's the point? What's
Yeah.
the purpose? What's behind your desire? So you talk about a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, and I know that you've quoted and referenced Carol Dweck's opinion and work on that, and starting with her book Mindset: The New Psychology of Success, where she talks about moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And you accept that, but if I'm not mistaken, you look at that as purpose as an added layer on top of that. Is that an accurate assessment on my part?
Yes, but there is also, my colleague Aaron Hurst and I are now on this mission where we really want to go into the classrooms and get kids at a very early age start focusing on purpose. Because I think what happens is by the time they come out into the college, they're so focused on growth. And then when you get into business, it's even more difficult to kind of get people to understand, the importance of purpose. So as much as it is additive, I also think that it is something that we all need to really reflect on. I wish I knew what I knew now when I was raising my kids.
Uh-huh.
But but that's past, right? So I am now challenging my friends and even my students. It's not about who you want to be. It's who do you want to serve? Let's start with that. Then you can become a doctor or an engineer or a scientist or pick whatever profession you want. But we are driven by identifying ourselves with the profession that we want to be in, rather than what impact we want to have on the world. So in some ways, the how has taken over the why.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
So
the
I'm
change
not
we want
sure.
to make.
Yeah, and I love that, and I believe in that 100%. And I was going to say, I'm not sure whether or not you're familiar with what my listeners know to be one of my favorite books and book series, The Go-Giver, authored by Bob Burg and John David Mann. But it talks about our true worth is determined how much more we give in value than take in payment. And there is a statement in the book where the young man, the focus of the book, is speaking to his mentor and says, "Oh, we could make a killing doing that." And the mentor, Pindar, says, does it make money is not a bad question. It's a great question. It's just a bad first question. The first question is, who does it serve and how? So what that means is when you bring the value, the money will follow, and it's fine to make money. It's great to make money, but to really maximize that, we need to understand what value we're bringing and who benefits from it.
Correct. And I also want to be cautious about giving, because giving is now getting equated to philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose is not about philanthropy. Purpose is actually how you show up for life, how you wake up every day
Like that.
and show up.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. If you're making money, go make money. How are you doing it and for why? Why are you doing it? What is the benefit? So I just want us to be cautious that listeners don't get that, purpose is all about giving back. No, purpose is really about keeping that trinity in the center of what you do. If I succeed, my work succeeds, my community benefits. And if we are a social animals, we don't live in an individualistic way. We become an individualistic society. And what we are trying to do is to say, hey, look, we only exist because we're part of this. There are other people around us. And for us to really thrive, others also need to thrive. That's the only way you'll have clean air. That's the only way you'll have clean water. That's the only way you will have this beautiful nature outside, or people that are smiling at you, or willing to talk to you. So it's that world I'm talking about.
And that's a world that I fully understand what you're describing and fully embrace it and agree with it, and therefore I wish you the absolute highest of success. Tell us a little bit. Well, I was going to ask you to talk about the Center for Purpose mindset, but first, share with us, please, the story of and how we got to the point of you having written the book Purpose Mindset. For those of you listening while watching on YouTube, I'm holding up a copy of the book, and you can see in the back of Akhtar's screen that he has, surprisingly, a few copies of his book on display. The Purpose Mindset by Akhtar Badshah. Tell us about that. I know it's predicated on your work in Microsoft, but give us the synopsis.
Yeah, so I actually, as I said to your listeners, my wife joined Microsoft before I joined on the East Coast in 1993. And, I would kind of hear this Microsoft employees in the month of October would get energized about raising funds and investing back into the community. And I was always kind of looking and said, why are people doing that? What's the motivating factor? And sitting on the East Coast, you kind of just come in touch with it for a few moments and then it kind of disappears. But when we moved here in 1998, I was in that community and I saw that energy. And to me, it was always very fascinating that why would a company for a whole month mobilize every employee to reach out and do something good in the community? And when I was given the opportunity to manage it and run it, I kind of started discovering this layers of people, of how they came in as all A-type personalities. And just because of that giving campaign and the ability to get involved, their humanity started flowing out. And when I left, I felt that this was a untold story about a company which has transformed the technology and the way we live and the way we communicate and the way we work. But it is also a bellwether for how it has actually invested in its employees to invest in the communities that they're going to live in, grow up in, marry in, have kids in, to ensure that that community continues to thrive. And that's the story of the book. And that was the reason why I thought that, one should write it. And out of that, I started discovering that, hey, there is something here beyond a growth mindset. And what is that?
Akhtar, let me interrupt just for a very quick second because I want to make sure that one of my biggest things is always trying to have clarity. If you could take just a second to maybe give us the name of the program that Microsoft had and the gist of what it was. It was a giving and a matching funds initiative, but more than that.
Yeah, so clearly Bill Gates grew up with Bill Gates Sr. and Mary Gates' mother were extremely committed to the community and very generous. And he grew up in an environment where his mother and father were always constantly doing something in the Seattle community. His mother eventually was on the board of the United Way, and father. So his mother was always kind of pushing Bill to do something in the company. Bill Newcomb, who came in as the chief legal officer for Microsoft in 1985, he basically asked Bill and John Shirley, the president of the company at that time, that he not only wants to start the chief legal officer, but he also wants to have a group focused on industry affairs, government affairs, corporate affairs, and community affairs. And and everybody understood industry, hey, we are now becoming part of the software industry, so we should really have some focus on that. Our work is all on IP and governments. We should actually have a government relations group. We should have a corporate relations group. So all of that made sense. But why community? And he basically said, look, we're getting these 20-something-year-olds working 18 hours a day trying to change the world through technology. They will grow up here. And we've got to give them the opportunity to get engaged in the community. So he asked Bill and John Shirley to say, can we create a employee giving matching gifts program where we will donate to to a nonprofit organization of the employee's choice and match their money one to one. And that's how the program started in 1985. And it's grown since that time, where last year they raised $220 million,
Wow.
right? Which was employee money and Microsoft match. Now that program this year has become a global program, not just a US-based program. So to me, it is that scale. If Bill had sat down in 1985 and said, this is going to be a $220 million investment for the company, he would have said no. And the numbers would just not add up.
Mm-hmm.
But even when he agreed to it, he was worried that will we be able to make the money to, and how will that work out? But they took the chance, knowing full well that not everybody was going to get the full match, but it would really be a way for investing people to invest in their community. And in doing so, we as a company would not be seen as an outsider. And that's the shift. So, I think that's the program. And then on top of that, of course, Microsoft does its own philanthropy, which I ran. It has its very strategic guidance. It provides technology support. It invests in education and training around technology learnings around the world. But the employee giving campaign is really this seminal thing which just allows every single person to get engaged into whatever they want to support and not be directed by anybody else.
And it's also integral, and again, using your words, in trying to create and shift to a we versus a me mindset, which is also, I think, part of how you define a purpose mindset. Share, share a little bit more about your thoughts on we versus me.
So, correct. So, thank you. So again, it kind of goes back to this notion of, yes, we are individuals. And we all have an individual personality. We all have an individual purpose. Every single purpose that I have got people to craft, we've crafted over 3,000 of them now for people around the world, are different. But every single one of them is now looking at it and saying, what am I leaving behind? And that's that shift from the focus on the individual to the collective we. And it happens because we shift how we see the world. That it's not just I am at the center of the world versus I am a participant of different nodes. And I may just be at the center of one node, which might be part of my family or part of my community, and that we all exist because we are interconnected. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to kind of get people to kind of move to that when I say moving to the we and the common good. We're kind of losing this essence of the common good, which this country had. This country is formed on the basis of the common good. Unlike most countries which came out of having people that ruled the country to a country that was formed on the common good. The pioneers who came in and settled here were all focused on the common good. And that's really where it is so important for us to kind of think about, which doesn't mean we lose our individuality, but it is that conscious contribution and being aware that you don't exist in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a quote on the cover of your book, which I really love. It's a quote by Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, where it says, "We must redefine what achieving more means for the world." How does that play into
Right,
your
because
purpose
right
mindset?
now, the definition of achieving more is how big are we as a company? How much have I benefited? How rich have I got? How much money have we made? How much sales have we got? So it's, Satya kind of goes on to kind of talk about, we kind of have to move away from that extractive mentality to a contributing mentality. That the first and foremost, are we actually going to make a difference with what we do? Or are we just going to take? And it's that shift, right, that we feel that it is a privilege to take versus that it is a privilege to contribute and contribute to something that lands up creating a larger good. And that doesn't mean that Satya is actually saying, hey, don't make money for the company, right? I mean, Microsoft is making money and should continue to make money. But how and why?
And also at what and whose expense. And I don't want to move this necessarily into any type of a political discussion per se, but I think there is a responsibility for our impact on the world, both, quote, our world, the close world around us, and the greater world. And that to me includes environmental responsibility, and that to me includes humanity responsibility. So I understand what you're saying, and I just wanted to put that out there because I do think that there is more that every company can have while the company makes money and while the company grows along those traditional business standards. I think there's a way for companies to grow in addition to that by what they add to and how they benefit and care for the world in general, be it humanity, be it environmental, be it however you determine it, something outside of just the growth of the company, the people within the company.
And, I actually believe that purpose allows you to create bridging networks rather than just bonding networks. The work that we have seen done by Robert Putnam around Bowling Alone, saying that our social bonds are fraying and that our communities are dissipating. And, we all had clubs and, we were bonding together. But today, I believe that purpose allows us to bridge together, which allows us to actually move across these cleavages, whether it is political, whether it is religious, whether it is wealth, whether it is caste, whether it is color. And people can come together. So to me, the more we get people to be focused around purpose, we can actually create these bridging environments. And if we can do early on in our lives, then we are setting people up to have a far more profound impact over the whole trajectory of the work that they're doing.
So you mentioned earlier, Akhtar, that just building on that comment, you mentioned earlier that your focus in the Innovators Group, but also the Center for Purpose Mindset, is to try to get to people at a much younger age so that they can start thinking, developing, and clarifying purpose early. Do you see that there is what I'm going to call a generational opportunity? We hear a lot about millennials and younger generations. They only want to work if they're, they want to do good, that kind of thing, which sounds as though it plays very well into the concept of adding more to the world, adding the purpose being more than the we focus versus the me focus. Do you see that opportunity or potential in it from a generational basis?
So I'm probably one of the few people who actually don't necessarily agree that suddenly the millennial and the new generation are much more community conscious. I believe our generation was also community conscious. We got massive amounts of nonprofits and others actually get created at that time. So I just think that now, because of social media, the ability to get people to do things in a collective fashion has increased exponentially, right? So that's the opportunity.
Okay.
I have worked with my undergrad students at the university and take them through it, and they get this aha moment. And then I suddenly realize that, if I can do it with them, why not with high school students? Why not with middle school students? And maybe if we put them in this thinking at a slightly earlier age, we might see transformations even when people come into college, let alone getting into the workspace. So again, to me, we are seeing this great resignation, right? We are seeing this great resignation. People are moving jobs, people are looking for meaning in their work, but they haven't figured out what meaning they want from their life. So how can they find this meaning? So unless we can get them to
Hmm.
craft the purpose statement and take them through that process, then the exercise becomes pointless. Now the quiet, you know, um, quitting. Again, these are things where if you can get people motivated, where they can actually see the higher value of what they're doing through their work, then these things become irrelevant. And I'm not saying that people should work 18 hours or people should work 20 hours. People can work 5 hours and make a
Hmm.
huge contribution. Because if
Hmm.
their work also extends out into the community for what they also want to do, then you've got this continuum. But we kind of compartmentalize. Actually, we compartmentalize ourselves in the way we show up. I show up as a different person for my work than I would show up at home because we've been taught that.
Hmm.
But I'm saying that we all have different skills. We are musicians, we are artists, we are athletes, we are all of this. Bring all of that into everything that you do, not just your work. Then you will thrive. Then you would feel the satisfaction and the purpose of what you're doing.
Well, I agree with you unequivocally. And I talk about, and others talk about, uh, having a purpose that integrates all aspects of our life, be it our work, be it our home life, be it our community active. Let me ask you this quickly, because I want to be very respectful of your time, and we're not at the end, but we're nearing, closing towards the end. You, again, building on the thought of reaching people in at college age or even high school age, how we understand that as a part of your purpose. Let me ask you the how. How are you going about doing that? How are you trying to accomplish that? And does it have something to do with your Center for Purpose mindset?
So we are actually hoping to launch our Center for Purpose Mindset to be able to just do that, right? So right now, what I have been doing is I work with organizations. I work with companies, large companies, small companies, nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, government organizations, where they bring me in to work with their teams to help them craft a purpose statement. Where we get individuals to craft their individual purpose statement and then try and see how we can bring that into a collective form for that group or for that team or for that organization. So I have worked with the University of Washington, Portland State University, uh, universities in Egypt, other parts of the world, where I've come in and given talks and got students to actually craft their purpose statement. We've done it companies for Microsoft and Starbucks and Avanade and Question Pro and iCertis and big companies, small companies. And the basic goal is to really get this, much more into how we think as a system. Aaron Hurst, who wrote the book Purpose Economy and has got an organization called Imperative, he and I actually now believe that we need to get it down into the schools. because that's the next challenge. And the center is getting set up to be able to do that. Work with teachers, train teachers, work with educators, train them. And as part of all the mindfulness exercises we are now doing into classrooms, bring this in. What we do is very simple. We just I can get you to craft a purpose statement in 10 minutes. And it's not really the words that you put on paper. It is the fact that you've gone through that, opened up that part of your brain cells, that now if I can get you to just be focused on it, you will keep that in the center of everything that you do. And that's the exercise that we're trying to do. It's really building atomic habits. It's small habits that become big, which become part of who you are. And that's really the existence that we are trying to get people to focus on.
Beautiful. And I wish you great success in that regard, because I agree that it's very necessary. You mentioned earlier, so I'm speaking with my guest, Akhtar Badshah, author of Purpose Mindset. You mentioned earlier bringing everything together, including skills like art and artistry, and I mentioned that because it caught my attention when you said that, because again, those watching this on the YouTube channel, you see in the background a painting above Akhtar's head. That's his work. So you do a lot of painting, and I've seen some of your paintings from afar, and I love them. How does that play into you yourself, your greater purpose?
So, I mean, it's just my way of showing up for life, right? I mean, I like to paint. I have some skills to do that. I'm probably a horrible painter, but anyways, it doesn't really matter your level of your skill. It's what it allows me to use both sides of my brain. I keep my paintbrushes right behind me. My easel is behind me, and I'm constantly working. And it's colors and the thought that I give to what I put. And then I share it with people, because people can actually see that I'm not just some guy that writes books and gives talks all the time. Right? That we all have different parts of our ethos. And if you can bring that out, now people can actually see you in a very different light. And now people look at it and say, okay, this guy understands color. He uses color in very different ways. He's got a very different way of representing humanity.
So, Akhtar, I want to take exception with one thing you said, which is you're not a very good painter. And I would say that's subjective. And that's one thing about the arts. The arts are subjective. First of all, I like your painting just for art's sake. But you also mentioned that it helps to expand people's understanding of who you are, what you are, and I hate this phrase, but the total package, the total human that you are. And I think that's important because we are a society that pigeonholes. We are a society that wants to put people in a box. So I applaud you for pursuing that art, and I applaud you even more for sharing it, even though you feel you're not a great artist. Well, now it's time for us to finish with the question.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah, please do. Go ahead, please.
On that. But I think it's very important. See, I'm not a great artist. My uncle was a great artist. He was one of India's masters. But we all can do certain things. We don't have to be excellent to showcase that that's who we are. Right? We don't have to be a top-notch musician to say, I play music. Our society kind of says you're not an artist unless you're a top-notch artist. So then people shy away from saying, I do things, I'm good at art. Mm-hmm. I just want people to show up as they are and accept that. Improve on it when possible, but it doesn't necessarily mean you got to be great at everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. That's a very important point, and I think we're I was skirting around, I think, what the point you were making, so thank you for adding that clarification. because it's kind of like we talked about the picture behind me of Augusta National. We don't all have to be at the level of being able to qualify and play in the Masters to say we're golfers. There are some people that would tell me I should never say I'm a golfer, but I think the point's made. So again, I was going to say we've gotten to the point where every single show I end up with this question of my guests. We've talked a lot about your journey from India to the States, from architecture to community work to author to trying to help reshape the definition of adding more, what more is. And when you put all of that together, the question is very simply this, Akhtar, what's the point?
I think the point is very simple. We all want to exist. We all want to contribute. We've been put on life. We've been given birth, and we have been put on this planet for a purpose. Every single one of us. Rich, poor, well-educated, not educated, shapes, sizes, we are all here for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can articulate our purpose and show up, then the point is that we all as a community can work slowly to create a much better world for future generations. That's the point.
I love that. And I am so very grateful that you have gifted your time and your knowledge and your insights. Thank you so much. Akhtar Badshah, my guest today, author of Purpose Mindset, and just so very involved in so many things. All of the things we've mentioned, the Center for Purpose Mindset, the Catalytic Innovators Group, the book, everything else will be in the show notes. Thank you again for your insights, Akhtar, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you very much, Bill, for having me on What's the Point? Love it.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise you'll gain value in every one. Rating and reviewing makes us more discoverable and helps others find out what's the point. And if you'd like to know more about Bill Ellis or contact him, please visit his website, www.brandingpillars.com. See you next time.